Alright, so I just test drove the Jaecoo J7 here in Penang, and the model that I tested was the AWD version that cost close to 149,000 ringgit here in Malaysia. Now, clearly everyone's opinion is going to be different, but this is just my thoughts after driving it for a couple of minutes. Now, first things first, I want to start off with the design. The design itself is quite subjective because some of you might like it or hate it, and again, it's really down to your personal preference. But what I can say after seeing the SUV itself is, number one, it's a huge SUV, it's very big. Number two, it's supposed to be quite solid. I can't really tell how long it runs over the long term. And number three, what I can say is that it does come with a minimalist, sort of like modern design. When it's passing through on the road, you definitely notice its road presence simply because it's such a large vehicle, and of course because it has that Range Rover sort of like side profile. Now moving on to the inside, the interior design is actually quite interesting. So on first impressions, I noticed that there's actually a couple of layers at the front dashboard, which makes it look a bit more premium than what you might think. Alright, so Jaecoo is saying that this is supposed to be their more premium, luxury kind of SUV. I wouldn't really go to the extent by calling it a luxury SUV because, again, on first impressions, the things that you can see actually has a bit of soft touch. The steering wheel is quite nice, but if you look a bit deeper and closer towards the middle section or the bottom section, you'll notice that we have very cheap plasticky, hard plastics actually on that section. So it doesn't really feel all that nice. However, if you talk about the seats, if you're just sitting at the back or if you're just looking towards the dashboard, yes, the first impression is quite a bit of a wow factor because you do have some very nice design elements that goes all around. Nevertheless, I do think that the design is quite alright, but I wish that the quality of the materials being used was a little bit better. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about that big display in the middle. Now personally, I'm not a huge fan of everything having to be controlled by the main display because it really kind of like distracts you when you are driving. I have my experience with that. And of course, one really weird thing is that there's no volume rocker for the volume. What's even more puzzling is that there's not even the volume option in the display itself, and the salesman couldn't even tell me where it is. So what he told me, and correct me if we are wrong, is that the only way to tweak the volume is on the steering wheel itself. Again, that's quite weird, but also something that I think should be highlighted. Alright, now third thing, the third point I want to highlight here is actually all about just the ride comfort. So I had a chance to drive the car but also sit at the back. Now sitting at the back, I can say it's quite a comfortable experience. The wind isolation is actually quite good and you don't hear a lot of noise. I would actually describe the experience close to something like a Proton X70. There's a lot of leg room at the back, and of course with that huge glass at the top, you definitely feel very airy on the inside. Now just a very quick note on the audio, I did try to listen to a couple of music on these so-called Sony branded speakers. Yeah, the sound do go very loud and there's quite a fair amount of deep bass, but don't expect the quality to be super over the top, it's just good enough for the price. Alright, last but not least, let's talk very quickly about the driving experience. Now again, bear in mind this is just a test drive and not something that you do like a media drive on the road because we don't have that. But anyways, driving in the car itself, driving the SUV itself, I have a couple of points here. Number one, in terms of the refinement, I noticed that the refinement on the Jaecoo J7 is actually more refined than a couple of other China cars that I've driven before. Now, I wouldn't say that the refinement is close to that of a Japanese car. It's still not there yet, but it's still a very good advancement in terms of cars made in China. Now, second, I did notice there's quite a fair bit of turbo lag here. So for instance, if you just floor the pedal, it will not go off, straight off the bat. In fact, it takes a little bit longer than some other cars. But what I can say is that the car itself, the SUV itself, is obviously not designed to be a sports car and not supposed to be racing it on the road. A lot of people are actually very concerned about the engine only being 1.6 liters, and they have the mindset that the car is not powerful enough, but the J7 is definitely more powerful than you think. I still think it's quite a fast SUV considering the weight, but it's still able to achieve like less than 10 seconds for the 0 to 100 kilometers per hour acceleration. Now another thing I want to highlight here is in terms of the steering itself is quite lightweight, and I feel it's very good to maneuver around, especially in tight corners in cities. We did a very quick parking and it was actually very easy, so don't worry too much about the steering. Don't worry that it's such a big vehicle. It's still going to be quite easy to manage as well as maneuver around town. So anyways, those are just my very quick thoughts after test driving the Jaecoo 7 here in Penang actually. Yeah, if you have any further thoughts on what the car actually performs, or if you have tried it yourself, let me know what you think about the Jaecoo J7 here in Malaysia. Definitely would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and subscribe to see more content if you want to. See you in the next one. Take care, bye bye.